prepared for you that talks about what we're actually going to cover today and gives you some homework and challenges for after this class. So the Indie Game Academy, our sort of whole philosophy, there's this beautiful quote by Jesse Schell, who's one of the big wigs, one of the guys to listen to in the game design world. And he has this beautiful quote that goes like this: "Your first 10 games are gonna suck, so you might as well get them out of the way as fast as you can." So we very much prescribe to that mentality. We're here to make games quickly so that we understand how to make them and make bigger and better games in the future. So that's what this course is all about. And this handout is in service of that. So you'll see that there's some work for you to do even after the class closes. And if you really want to maximize your education, you can totally follow it. You'll also see a little GIF of the final version of Mario today. You can see that there's no animations, there's no sounds. It's not the most beautiful game in the world. But the point is that you have a fully completed game loop, a fully completed game that you can play and finish in just 2 hours. So this is what we're going to be building right now. And then, most importantly, you'll see your images, scripts, and sounds that I have prepared for you. You can go ahead and download all 3 of these folders. You can just right-click on it and hit download. And if you're having problems, you can download the scripts or images one at a time, although that is a little bit more annoying. That will sometimes fix issues if you're having them. And the minute you download those, we can get started. I'll give you just a second to download them. And then we'll start talking about Unity Hub here. By the way,
is a file, so they'll need to unzip them.
Yes, so it will download it in a zip file. Although, does it do that for PC as well? David?
Yeah, it came through as a zip file on mine.
Okay, yeah. So you will need some sort of unzip utility. If you don't have an unzip utility, you can get one. They are free. Or you can download each image at a time, which is a little bit more annoying, but totally works. There's not too many assets in here. And we'll be using them pretty slowly, so it's not too big a deal. All right, so I'm going to start talking about Unity Hub. As I said, please keep your mic muted unless you have a question. And if you do have a question, absolutely feel free to interject and turn it on for a moment. So if I'm moving too quick or you missed a step or whatever, it is better for me to know that now than to find out in an hour when you're hopelessly far behind. Okay, so for most of you, you will have downloaded and installed Unity Hub. It is also possible that you download and install just Unity by itself, but Unity Hub is actually a wonderful tool. It's relatively recent, just 2 or 3, maybe 4 years old at this point, and solves a very simple problem, which is that you have all of your projects in one place and all of your versions of Unity in one place, which is just like amazing, perfect. If it is not already clear, in order to make a new project, when you have Unity Hub open, all you got to do is hit the new button. It'll pop up a dialog about about a little bit of information about your game. I recommend that you choose a single location for all of your Unity projects. So on pretty much every computer I've had since the beginning of time, I've had a workspace folder that I put all of my projects in, but it's up to you how you organize it. You can go ahead and name your game whenever you want. I named mine Mario with Remote Game Jobs. And then you can click on 2D. So a fun fact about Unity that we will run into as we go is that this game, Unity itself, was actually designed for 3D games first. And then 2D games were kind of an afterthought that got added later. And now Unity is used for 2D games more often than not. It's kind of funny. Then you can hit Create. Unity will do some setup, which will take some time. And eventually, you'll be presented with this screen. So I'm going to wait a second. And for anybody who has a camera on, can I get a thumb up when you have your main Unity window open and all set? Let me know as you go. And I'll say it one more time. If you guys are comfortable, I would love to see your faces, even if we don't have the mics on. So turn on your cameras. Helps me know what's going on. Okay. Let's see. Patrick is currently my barometer. Patrick, do you have a new Unity project open? Oh, no. What's happening, Patrick?
Good now.
This is where you're trying to get.
It just popped up.
Okay, it was just taking a little while. That does happen. Unity is an incredibly powerful tool, a wonderful tool. It enables so much in our world. And in case you didn't know, about 60% of new games, of brand new games, are currently built in Unity. Yes, that is not wrong. That is a crazy stat. Unreal Tournament is in second place, and they're only 15 to 20%. So here is the Unity IDE. Does anybody know what an IDE is? An IDE. Great. So an IDE is an integrated development environment. Back in the old days, we used to have to code games completely just in text editors. These days, we have IDEs, which you can kind of imagine as like a Photoshop for building games. We are building games in a much more visual layout instead of just having to look at code, which makes life so much easier. We will definitely still be coding, but this makes it much more intuitive. So the first thing that I would like you to do, unless you are already fairly comfortable in Unity, is I'd like you to set up your IDE a little bit to match my own so that it's easier for me to troubleshoot and it's easier for you to follow the class. So we have, you can see here in the center of the screen, this is the default layout. So this is probably what your game looks like right now. We have a scene tab and a game tab. And there are plenty of other tabs around. You can see the hierarchy, the console, the project. These tabs can be clicked and dragged to different locations in the IDE. So what I'd like you to do first is to click and drag that game tab and put it in the middle center. You can kind of snap it to the right-hand side like I did there, but not all the way to the right-hand side. So this way, you may have to finagle it a little bit to get it quite right. This way, you should have both your scene and your game open at the same time. This is a much more intuitive layout I have found. All right. Then we have two more changes to do to the IDE before we start making stuff. In the bottom, you're going to do the same thing. We currently have a project tab and a console tab. I want you to click and drag this console tab into the middle bottom area. And the console likes to be nice and wide, so you can drag that out and have most of this be the console. So now I have a project, a console. Every one of my tabs is currently its own little mini window. That's what we want. Okay, and then one last change. And like I said, this is all personal preference. You can always experiment with this and figure out what you like best. But in my project tab in the bottom left, we'll see that at the top right of the project tab, there's these three little dots. Whenever you see those three little dots, they are the settings for the associated thing. In this case, it is the project tab. So in the settings of the project tab, I want you to switch to a one-column layout, which is a much more traditional setup that you might find in Finder or File Explorer. I much prefer this, and I find it more intuitive for fresh students. Okay. How are we looking? Do I have thumbs up from people? All right, Patrick is giving me a thumb. Unless you message me something, or I see your face giving me a thumb down, or you turn off your mic and ask a question, then I'm just going to keep barreling on, so it's up to you to stop me. Okay, so what we're going to do first is discuss a little bit about how Unity works and how each of these tabs sort of commingle, what they're actually used for, and then we're going to start building our platformer. So first of all, Unity is based on what we call scenes. And you can see we have a scene tab here in the middle. A scene is, you can kind of imagine it like a level. It's sort of one physical layout of something. So in Unity, it's very common for people to use scenes to indicate level 1, level 2, level 3, maybe a scene for like a main menu, maybe a scene for, I don't know, the store screen, that kind of stuff. It is just a way to compartmentalize and break down the layouts for your different parts of your game. And like I said, probably the most common use of that is levels. So right now we have just one scene, which is currently called sample scene. And you can see it in two different locations. In our hierarchy, which should be on your left-hand side, big, long, tall thing, at the very top, it tells you the name of the current scene. This is currently called sample scene. And you'll also see that sample scene in our project in the bottom left. So let's start with our project there. Our project tab is equivalent to the library in Photoshop. It is the location for all assets that are available to you in this project. So once I start adding scripts, once I start adding images, once I start adding sounds, they're all going to go into my project tab. This is my library of stuff that I can use to make my game. My hierarchy is everything that exists in my current scene. So there's only one thing in my current scene right now. Only one thing exists in my current scene. Who can tell me what that thing is? Don't be scared. You can turn on your mics. You can tell me. Or you can at least shoot a message.
It's the main camera.
The main camera.
I had a
Yeah.
question that
Yep, go ahead.
in my screen it says assertion failed on expression device dot inside frame. It's me only or everybody else? It
What is it saying?
assertion failed on expression device dot
Is that saying it in the console
yeah.
down here? Yeah. So let me tell y'all one more fun fact about Unity. It is an incredibly powerful tool that can do an incredible amount of stuff. But because it has so much stuff, it also breaks. So probably you have an error that is bogus. It's not an actual problem. And the way you can check that is in the console. You can see right under the console tab, there's a clear button. If you hit clear and the error goes away, much of the time, this is not always true, but much of the time, the error is not actually a problem. If you hit clear and it goes away. So tell me if that goes away once you hit clear. You can stop me if not. Whoops. All right.
They all gone away. There was 5 errors. They all gone. Right.
Perfect. Yeah. So it may still be a problem. Don't quote me on that. But Unity will sometimes just be like, I'm broken, even though it's like totally fine. And it's just because they have so many different features that they have to support that there's almost always a little bit of funkiness. It's just something you kind of have to accept. So we have a main camera. Yes, somebody pointed that out. Thank you. So we'll see that in my hierarchy, if I click on anything in the hierarchy, currently it's just the main camera. Over in my inspector, all the way on the right-hand side, a bunch of information will drop down. This information is everything there is to know about this selected object. So in this case, the main camera. So first of all, we can see that it has a name at the top. It's called the main camera. Next, we have what's called a transform, which has a bunch of information in it. And then a camera, which has a bunch of information in it. So the inspector is, first of all, a place to inspect, to actually look and learn about this object. But it's also one of the primary places that you're going to be editing your game. So what I'd like you to do, the very first way you're going to customize your own version of Mario, there is a background sort of block of color right here. If you click that, just literally click the color itself, a color wheel will pop up, and you can change the color that the camera will see in the background. So go ahead and pick a color that feels right to you. Find the mood for your custom Mario game. Maybe I'm gonna go for let's see, about like a nice light blue. Yeah, that's feeling good. Nice and calm. Great. So there you go. You guys are game developers. That's the class. It's been good. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So we have a custom color in our background, and that is an example very quickly of how to actually use the inspector. We're going to be using the inspector a lot, but you've now just done it for the first time. The other thing that I will point out here, does anybody know what a component-based system is? A component-based system. So one of the things that makes Unity unique is that it is a component-based programming system, or component-based game development suite. Traditionally, in the old world, in the old coding world, we would use what's called object-oriented programming, which means that when we make a new script, when we code something, we would probably code the entire thing in that one script. So I might code a dog. I would write like dog.cs, and the dog would know all about being a dog. In a component-based system, we would instead code the individual parts of that dog. So I would code like fur, and I would code a tongue, and I would code legs. And then I would stick those components together in order to make a dog. Can anybody guess why that is awesome? Why use component-based systems?
You can use them for multiple things.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't want to push anybody out of their comfort zones, but it really helps me if y'all are speaking to me. So please feel free to turn on your mics and talk. So it's simply all about robustness or reusability. The fact that I can slap those legs on that dog means I can also slap those legs on the cat. And I no longer have to program the cat's legs. I can just change the parts that are uniquely a cat or uniquely a dog. So we'll see that on our camera, we have exactly 2 components. And this is why I'm talking about this now. This is an important part of the inspector. So there are 2 components on my camera. Can anybody guess what those 2 components are? My hint is they're in the inspector. What are the 2 components? All right. Well, the 2 components are the transform and the camera. So anytime you see one of these bars across the top, that is a component. A transform component has all of the information about position in space, and our camera component has all of the information about how a camera functions. So our inspector is all about changing information and learning about the selected object. Our scene is where we actually edit these objects, where we can actually see them physically laid out. So we can see our camera in our scene right now. And our game is what the player would actually see if they were playing this game. This is basically a live emulator or simulator of your game. This is one of the things that makes Unity unique and powerful. I can run my game literally as I edit it. Pretty amazing. All right, so let's add our first object to the scene. In the hierarchy, in the very top left, we're going to hit a plus button. We're going to go down to 2D object, and we're going to hit sprite. And then you could choose, why don't we do a square, actually? Hit the plus button, hit 2D object, sprites, square. And you will see that immediately a couple of things happened. One, in the hierarchy, a square suddenly appeared. In the scene, a literal square appeared, and we can now see that square in our game. So this is what the player would be seeing. So let's learn how to manipulate this square a little bit. You have a plethora of tools available to you to manipulate this square. In the very, very top left of Unity, underneath the close buttons, you'll see all of these tools. The left-hand side one is the hand. You can click and drag with the hand. But a hot Unity tip is even if you have another tool selected, you can right-click to get the hand immediately. So you pretty much don't need the hand tool by itself. Right-click and drag to get the hand tool. The next tool is the position tool, the move tool. If I have my square selected, I can move my square along the X and Y axis by clicking on these arrows. And I can move it along both axes at once by clicking that square in the center there. So go ahead and move your square around a little bit. Next, we've got a rotate tool, which does what it sounds like. I can rotate my square along any axis. And you'll notice that I can actually rotate it along axes in 3-dimensional space. Wow. And that's because, like I mentioned, this is actually not a 2D game. It may look like a 2D game and it may behave like a 2D game, but Unity was built to build 3D games first. You will notice that in many different ways. And you can actually switch to a 3D mode by hitting the 2D button in the very top of the scene. And that is a toggle. So now suddenly we're in a 3D view of our game, which can get really confusing really quickly. So if you're trapped in 3D, just hit this 2D toggle again, and you will see the world again through the 2D lens. All right. Next.
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I had a question that there is a plus button that you use to bring the square, but in my ID, I hope so it is 5.6 and it is your latest one, I think, because my system doesn't support it, but it doesn't have a square thing, 2D object.
Yeah, so that's totally fine. Yeah, so that's totally fine. So you just have a slightly older version of Unity. That is okay. It'll still totally work. And in fact, why don't we jump ahead a little bit here? This will help you and it will help everybody else understand. So if I go to 2D object and then I think I can, no, I can't just hit sprite. Let's see. If I go to 2D object here, and you will just have a sprite button, right? You can click sprite.
Yeah.
But it created kind of nothing. It looks like there's nothing there.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have, so you have a sprite. You do have a sprite, but that sprite currently has no picture selected, no sprite selected. So you have this. You know that you have a sprite. You can see here in the hierarchy, it does exist. And in fact, if you select the move tool, you can see that you can place that sprite. Let me fix these rotations here. You can see that I can edit any of these values in the inspector, which is very, very useful. So I do have a sprite, but it has no physical representation. So remember that Unity is a component-based system. On our main camera, we have a transform, which is position, rotation, and scale. It is your position in space. And we have a camera, which tells a camera how to be a camera. Our square has a transform, and it has a sprite renderer. So can you tell me what is wrong with my sprite right now, looking at my sprite renderer right here? Why can I not see anything?
Doesn't have it selects none.
Yes, currently we actually don't have a sprite for this sprite to display. So for everybody else who has a more recent version of Unity, there's going to be many options for you to choose from. If you don't, there are still a couple of built-in options for you to start to play with. You can, I'll tell you the other option in just a second. For now, whenever you have an empty box like this, you are expected to put something there, which we'll talk more about as we go. But all the way on the right-hand side of that empty box, you'll see a circle. And if you click on that circle, it'll actually open uniquely all of the objects that fit what this box is expecting. So all of the sprites that are available to you. And you can just select one of these, and now suddenly my sprite is back and it has a physical body. All good? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Let me know if you have more issues.
Yeah.
All right, so last couple of tools. We have our scale tool, which does what it sounds like. It scales, and it behaves much like our move tool. So we have an X and a Y, and then if we click in the middle, we can do both. We then have our Rect tool. This is probably the tool that I use the most and leave selected. It behaves more like a Microsoft Word or a Google Doc, where it actually has the corners that you can click and drag for scaling. And then the reason that I often use it is it also, if I sort of hover over the corner, once again, much like Microsoft Word, allows me to rotate. And if I click on the object itself, it allows me to move it. So I find that the scale tool sort of intuitively makes the most sense to me, but feel free to use what tools make sense to you. And then the last tool is heinously complicated, and I have yet to meet somebody who likes this one. It is a combination of all of the tools all at once. You can see that it scales, it rotates, and it moves. If you like that, go for it. But it stresses me out to even look at it. So I'm going to leave the scale, the Rect tool on for my circle. Okay. So I have this little circle on the screen, but this is a platformer. So let's fix this circle right this second. You can see that in my transform, I've been doing a lot of editing by just changing these numbers manually. You can totally do that here. So I want to fix my rotation, just change that to 0. If I want to scale this thing by twice the size, I change the 1 to 2. If I want to scale it by 10 times the size, change it 1 to 10, whatever. So any of these variables, options that are here in the inspector are available for you to play with, and I encourage you to play with them, because that is the way that you'll become a more comfortable, better game developer, game engineer. So we have a square. I would like us to now grab the images that we downloaded from the Google Drive that I gave you guys earlier. There is a link in the text channel just above this, this chat, if you haven't already done so. You can download the entire folder, which includes, like I said, a handout as well as images, scripts, and sounds. You can go ahead and drag in your entire images folder. And in order to import something into Unity, it is super simple. You literally just click and drag the object, so the image, or the entire folder, straight into the Project tab. And you'll see that it's working correctly if the Project tab gives you the little blue line to try to organize where it goes. So I'm going to click and drag this entire images folder, and we'll see that all of these images are now available to me in Unity. And by the way, just as a quick clarification, Unity is duplicating these images and putting it in your project folder. So you don't need to worry about losing the originals. It is not moving, it is duplicating. Okay, so let's change our square a little bit. We just saw how to do this. But there are multiple ways to actually add an image or a sprite to your scene. Currently, I showed you how to hit this little circle, and that will show you all of the options available to you for that thing. In this case, it's a sprite. So you can hit that little circle, and now we can see Mario and Piranha Plant and Brick and Coin and Flag all available to you. But if you want it to be a little bit more direct or a little bit faster, you can actually click and drag and drop into this empty box. Whenever you have an empty box, you're allowed to drag and drop into it. So if I find my brick, that's what we're looking for here. We're going to make a platform. If I find my brick, if I click and drag this brick and drop it into this empty box, we will see that the sprite gets replaced with the brick and the box appears on the screen. Now, you may have also noticed something else, that when I was clicking and dragging, when I was over the scene, Unity automatically stuck this thing in the scene for us. If I drop when I'm in the scene, Unity will actually automatically make a new game object with the same name as the picture, with a sprite renderer component, and then it will attach the brick to this sprite. This is what I'm talking about with Unity supporting tons of features and making your lives oh so easier. All you got to do is click and drag whatever you want straight into your scene, and you will immediately have a new object. Now, I don't want to do that quite yet. By the way, for whatever reason, in order to actually delete something, you either need to right-click and hit delete, or on Mac, you need to hit Command delete, or on PC, I believe it is Control delete when you have something selected. If you just hit delete, it doesn't like it. I don't know why. That's just something they decided. All right. So we're going to actually make some physics happen now. Congratulations, guys. You have leveled up from the land of IDE, and now we're moving on to colliders and physics. So we have a platform right here, but the platform is not much without a Mario. So let's do what we just learned. Click and drag our Mario into the scene. He is currently Giga Mario, so we could shrink him down a little bit by changing this scale, but we just learned how to do that, so that shouldn't be too big a deal. Maybe 0.25. Even that's probably a little bit big. Let's see. 0.15? Yeah, it looks about right. There we go. We got a little
Willem,
Mario.
Can I, for a moment?
Yeah.
From the chat, someone is having trouble dragging things from into the scene. They're getting a cancel logo.
A cancel logo.
Circle with it.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with that. What that would mean off the top of my head. Are you able to make new sprites and still attach the correct image to those new sprites? In order to try to move as quickly as we can to get this game done, if that works, I'll ask you to do that for now, and then maybe we can try to figure it out once class finishes. So let me know. I'm going to keep moving, and just let me know if that works for you. Okay. So we have a Mario and we have a platform. Right now, hello? Somebody's mic is very loud. Whoever's got static going on, would you please mute your mic?
It's the person who has problem with the dragging, so I think she's trying to explain.
Okay. I'm seeing the cancel logo like this. Oh, hey, Megas Mindo is trying to help them, looks like. Thank you.
Yeah, Megas Mindo is really the star today in the chat. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, looks like it. Honey Girl, would you mute yourself now, though? We cannot hear what you're saying if you are trying to talk, but it is a little bit loud. Thank you so much. If you can shoot messages in the chat. Oh, okay. So here, I will point this out. This may be what's happening, although it's a bit weird that it's happening. So one quick thing to point out here. You can see that even when I click on something in the project, when I click on the brick or the coin or the flag, there is all kinds of information about it in the inspector. The inspector will literally tell you about everything. If I click on the scene, okay, there's no information on the scene. Bad point, but that's all right. Everything else, there's information in the inspector. So even these sprites that we imported have settings that Unity allows you to play with. And one of those is the texture type, which I believe is what we're trying to do. What Megas Mindo is pointing out here. Yes. So we can see that Megas Mindo's texture type is currently default, which maybe is what's happening. There are a number of different problems that could be happening, but you can try at least when you have the images selected, and you can totally shift and click to select multiple images at once. you can try changing your texture type from default or whatever it is over to sprite. Sprite, 2D and UI. And that may fix your problem for dragging and dropping. Okay, so in the very, very top middle of the screen, there are 3 buttons that I have not mentioned so far. We have a play button, a pause button, and a step button. Now, the step button is a little bit more advanced, and that is mostly for debugging and coding. So we're not really going to talk about it today. And the pause button does what it sounds like. It pauses the game. That is sometimes useful, though I think in this introductory course, you probably won't use it. The main button you're going to want to play with here is the play button. Like I said, one of the big features of Unity is that we allow emulation or simulation while the game is actually running, while you are editing it in here. So if I want to run my game of Mario and see Mario fall and land on this beautiful platform, all I got to do is hit play. Unity will take a second to compile, and then it will start simulating, and crap, nothing happened. Bum, bum, bum. Don't worry, this was all a setup, and I knew that nothing was going to happen. Can anybody guess why Mario is not currently falling and landing on the platform? By the way, before you answer that, make sure you stop playing. This is actually a very big point. If your game is currently running and you edit things, sometimes those edits will not be saved. Unity does this on purpose so that you can freely manipulate your world and not worry about it. But it's very important to remember. You can see that green that I just did changed back to blue when I stopped running. So if your game is running, do your test, run your test, see what happens, and then stop running it before you edit, or your edits may not be saved. Also, frequently save. Command S or Control S. Unity is fairly good about backups, but just like everything else, saving frequently is not a bad thing. Okay, so let's get to that guess. Why did Mario not fall and land on the platform? Anybody have a theory?
We haven't
He's gonna
solved the
fix-
game to do that.
Somebody, one more time? We haven't told the game to do that, I think is what you said?
Yeah, I was gonna say a fixed position. It's just in a
Yeah,
no
Yeah.
physics.
absolutely, yeah. There are objects in our games that we don't want to fall. So why would Unity expect us to drop this character? Why would Unity say like, oh, we definitely want everything to fall right out the box? How Unity works, we were talking about this earlier, is that it's component-based. And it has tons of components that are available to you. So if you want something to have physics, there's actually a component that takes care of that. So on Mario, I want you to have Mario selected. We're going to add our first component to our game. When you have Mario selected, in your inspector, you will see an Add Component button. I want you to hit that button, and I want you to search for Rigid Body 2D. Now, this is a very important point. Remember that I said everything in Unity was built for 3D first, and then they added 2D later. If you have 2 versions of a component, one that's 2D and one that is not 2D, the one that is not 2D is meant for 3D. So if you use that when you're making a 2D game, weird stuff will happen. So generally avoid it. If you're making a 2D game and you are given the option, always select the 2D option. So I want you to go ahead and click on the Rigid Body 2D component. You will see that it adds a new component, just like our sprite render and transform, and that this component has all kinds of information about it. And now if we hit play, Mario will fall and land on his sweet platform. Ah, crap. Still not working. But he does fall. And in fact, you can play with this a little bit. You can see, for instance, our gravity scale is how we manipulate the gravity effect on Mario. So if I made my gravity scale here a -1 and then I hit play, Mario will actually fall up into infinity forever and ever. Another hot tip, by the way, if you're ever like way out in space or you're trying to follow Mario into the ether, you can double click on anything in the hierarchy to immediately zoom to it. So if you're kind of lost, you can always do that. Double click on Mario and you'll move over to him. And the mouse wheel or trackpad lets you zoom in and out if you didn't already figure that one out. Okay, so on Mario, I want you to make sure that your gravity scale is 1 because we want him to fall. But why didn't he land on the platform? Anybody have a guess what we need?
rigid body 2D on the block.
That is a great guess, but actually not quite. If we put rigid body 2D on the box, it will fall to infinity, and even if we set the gravity scale to 0 so it didn't fall, Mario would still pass through it. And that's because the whole idea of a component is to split out the logic as much as possible, right? So that component does just one thing as much as possible. And Unity is absolutely not always great about this, and you as engineers will not always be great about this. But to the best of your ability, your components should do just one thing. So this rigid body applies physics. It says, hey, Unity, this thing needs physics. But it does not handle collisions. So we need a new component on both Mario and, let me rename this real quick, and our platform called a collider. So on Mario, I want you to hit add component, and I want you to search for collider. You will see that there are tons of options available to you. Remember that whenever you have a 2D option and a non-2D option, make sure you pick the 2D one. In this case, I'm actually going to hit a Capsule Collider 2D. A Capsule Collider 2D. And we will see a green line appear around Mario. And that's how you know that it now has a collider. That is the bounds of his collider. Unity will do its best to fit the shape of the sprite, but we can see that Mario has some white space on the left and right of him. So the collider is actually a little bit too wide. Just like any other type of component, we can edit that. So in our Capsule Collider 2D component, in our inspector, we can see that it has a size, X and Y. And we can actually play with those numbers to try to make this thing fit him a little bit better. So for me, it looks like a size of 6, and leaving just the default height works about correct. Now, one quick note about colliders is that the more shapes there are in the collider, the more vertices, the more complicated that collider is, and therefore the more taxing it is on the computer's processing power. So the less efficient it is. A capsule collider is actually fairly efficient because you can use math to simulate a curve. And so it actually only has just a couple of vertices. But you can see, for instance, you don't need to add this. This is just for demonstrations. If I wanted to, I could add a polygon collider 2D, which does a much better job of matching the geometry of Mario, but you can see how many vertices or points it has. And if you add too many of these polygon colliders to your game, you're going to have a very laggy game very quickly. So that's one of the reasons we use a capsule collider. Even though it's not perfectly matching Mario, it's going to match him good enough, and it will be highly efficient. On our platform, we can go ahead and add a box collider since it is box-shaped. So click on your platform, come over to the inspector, hit Add Component, search for Collider, and add yourself a box collider 2D. Now this will be hard to see because it will very perfectly match the edge of the box of the platform, but you can still see that it has a faint green line around the platform, and that's how we know the bounds of our collider. All right, so once you've added a rigid body to Mario and a collider to both Mario and the box, you should now be able to hit play, and finally, Mario will fall and land on the platform. Wow! Claps all around for everyone who's done this so far. If you haven't done it, don't worry, you can get there. Please ask me questions if you're having issues. Okay. So I'm going to pause here for a second and make sure everybody is caught up. Anyone whose face is on right now, Patrick, you got a Mario that falls, looks great? Nice, great. For anyone else, if you are behind, please write something or ask a question. So just to recap it real quickly, if anyone is behind, we have our Mario sprite and our platform sprite. On Mario, I hit Add Component, and I added a rigid body 2D. And then I hit Add Component, and I searched for Collider, and I added a Capsule Collider 2D. And then I clicked on my platform, and I clicked Add Component, and I searched for Collider, and added a Box Collider 2D. The colliders handle collision, so now these objects know when they should run into each other. And the rigid body 2D handles physics. Now Mario knows that he'll actually fall. So now when I hit play, Mario will fall and land on the platform. Okay. So we are now at a point where you get to play around a little bit. This is a great chance to get sort of practice just manipulating and editing your world. What I would like you to do just for the next couple of minutes is anybody basically, I want you to make a little level. I want you to take your platform, maybe duplicate it a couple of times, maybe find your own images for some platforms or for Mario and download them from the internet. Just make sure that they are transparent. If you search for like Sonic and then after that write transparent, you'll sometimes find images that are already transparent for you. If they don't have a transparent background, you will get like a white box around Mario, which is pretty ugly. And just add a couple of platforms. I'm only going to give you like 5 minutes, so don't get too crazy. But customize your game a little bit. I want enough of a level here so that you can actually add our coins and our enemy and our win flag in the next step. By the way, you can copy and paste objects in the hierarchy and in the scene. You can also right-click and hit duplicate, or you can click on it and hit Command-D on Mac or Control-D on PC. Okay, take a couple minutes, add some stuff to your world.
Willem, quick question. Is there a shortcut to make it step move? So, like...
To make what move?
Step move, the blocks, instead of smooth move, so that you can always have the same exact gap?
Yeah, grid. I think there's a button that you gotta hit while you're
Is it
dragging.
Is it control or is that a blender?
No, it is not controlled. There's a... Somebody can probably Google this. You're looking for snap to grid, which Unity does do. I just don't remember the hotkey for it. I'm trying all the buttons right now.
So hold down V. We got Migas again.
Hold down V.
Yeah.
Okay. Whoops. Not trying to do that. Let's see. That is not working for me. It might be a different setting for me.
Okay.
If people are having it work, that's totally fine. But yeah, that's what you're looking for. Snap to grid.
Okay. If anybody would like to share the level they made, you can post it in the text channel. We'd love to see it.
Oh, that would be perfect. Yes, please do. Awesome.
So if you hold down V and then you move your cursor over with the vertex, and then you move the vertex. Yeah. So you're snapping vertex to vertex. So hold down V and then go to the edge and then like snap to like move it towards one of the objects. Yeah, you have to do it from the corner. Yeah. Yeah, do it from the corner. Yeah.
Hey, look at that. Nice. Learned something new. Thanks, man. Great. All right. So, yeah, you guys can play with that. Thank you for that new tip. You learn something new every day. I'm just going to put literally just like a handful of blocks here. And you guys got like another 2 minutes. So if you're getting super complicated with your level, I am so happy for you, but you will have to do that more on your own time. So just make enough room so that we have space for a coin and an enemy and a win area. Like I said earlier on, the way that these courses go, because we're trying to fit so much into 2 hours, we kind of just get as far as we can, and we accept that we are imperfect humans, and that may not be an entirely completed Mario game. But that is why all of the scripts that I have available to you have a lot of comments in them to tell you how they actually function. And you have that worksheet in the Google Drive. So even if we don't get to a fully completed game, we should get pretty close, and then you'll also be able to follow the rest of the tutorial yourself to keep learning. Okay, so I have a very basic level. If you're still editing your level, go ahead and wrap it up. I'll give you another minute. Next, we're going to get Mario to move. We're going to do some coding, y'all. I hope you're ready. Okay. It is time. No more editing levels. Come back to me, people. We're going to make some stuff happen. So, once again, in the interest of making this course move as fast as possible, since we only have 2 hours, what we usually do is I give you many scripts that are already available, and I have you write one or two yourself so that you can understand how scripting works, but you don't have to write an entire platformer's worth of code. So you'll see that I actually have quite a few scripts available to you. We teach a number of these different classes, including Flappy Bird and Snake, and we've done a couple of others as well. And this is the most scripts, the highest number of scripts out of the 3. But don't be worried. We will go through them bit by bit, and it won't be too complicated. What I'd like you to do first is to grab the mover and the jumper and import those into your project just like you did with the images. Literally, all you have to do is drag them from Finder or File Explorer or wherever and drop them into your project. Now, just like with anything else, it pays, it literally pays to stay organized. So I have these scripts just sort of floating in my project folder, but it's always good to hit this plus button and make a new folder for your scripts or your code or however else it makes sense to you to organize, as long as you stay consistent. So I'm going to import my jumper and my mover into Unity. And now I have a jumper and a mover. Oh, excuse me. You will also need a ground detector. By the way, the reason that I knew that is because my console flashed a warning. In fact, it flashed an error. This would crash my game. The big red button means it's going to crash the game if you try to run it. So it says the type or namespace of ground detector could not be found. And that's because our jumper uses another component to help it out called ground detector. So we're going to have to click and drag on our ground detector and also drop that into our scripts folder. So get your mover, jumper, and your ground detector. Your mover, jumper, and your ground detector, and drop them into your scripts. So we're going to talk about what those scripts actually are in just a moment, but we're actually going to start by writing our own so that the coding makes a little bit more sense. The assumption in this class is that you may not know any coding at all. That is totally fine. So in our scripts folder, when I have the folder selected, I'm going to hit that plus button again. We can see that we have the same sort of plus button as in the hierarchy. And I'm going to hit C# script. And it will actually make a new script there, which I'm going to name player controller. Uppercase P, uppercase C, player controller. I'm going to hit that plus button. I'm going to hit C# script. When it makes a new thing, I'm going to type in player controller. Now, a really big gotcha. I want everyone, pause what you're doing. Listen to this for just a moment. A really big gotcha. When I open my script, which I can do by double-clicking on this, and it will open your default text editor. If you do not have a text editor, you can use literally anything. TextEdit will work, although it will kind of suck. For after this class, what I always recommend is just Visual Studio, which is the thing that usually comes paired with Unity, but sometimes you can download Unity without getting Visual Studio. And when you, after downloading Visual Studio, to hook it up, you're going to go up to Unity, you're going to go to Preferences, and you will see under External Tools, right here in the middle, External Tools, you will see that my external script editor is currently set to Visual Studio. So you can set that to whatever you want. Some people like, there are plenty of other script editors out there. I used to use Sublime Text for a long time. I still like that one. There are tons of others. Just select what you want there, and from then on in, anytime you double click on a script, it will open automatically. Now, here is the actual big gotcha. So once again, I'm going to ask you to pay attention for just a second, because this will happen to all of you at least once. It is a little bit frustrating, and I'm not exactly sure why they did it this way. But if my script here in the project needs its name changed, so maybe I mistyped it, or maybe I'm changing what I'm actually calling it. Let's say I right-click on this, and I hit rename, and I change it to, like, I don't know, input controller. Once I hit enter, and I open this script, we will notice that it is still called freaking player controller. This is the big gotcha. Whenever you change the name of a script, you have to change it in 2 locations. You have to both change it in the project folder. This is the name of the file itself. So if you were opening it up in File Explorer, this is what it would be called. And you also have to change it in the script itself. So I would now have to change this to be input controller. If you don't do that, Unity is going to get really confused and will not be able to find your script. Whenever you change the name of a script, you have to change it in 2 locations. Okay, that is all. Continue to go back to what you're doing. All right, so what I'd like you to do, if you haven't already, is make a new script and name it player controller.
I
What's
got something mono developed. It is fine when I open it.
It's fine. What was the question?
Okay. I'm using this first time, but I got it mono developed. It should be a Visual Studio.
Yeah, so Visual Studio is the one that I recommend. MonoDevelop is actually basically an old version of Visual Studio, but MonoDevelop will work just fine, especially for today. And then after today, you can download Visual Studio if you want.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to double click on the script. If for some reason double clicking is not working for you, what you can do is right click on the script and go to Reveal in Finder, or if you're on a PC, Reveal in File Explorer. And this will show you your actual Unity project, which you can see everything inside of is just like a standard asset. You know, there's an image here. They have meta files associated with them in Unity, but that's just a thing that Unity uses to keep track of your scripts and your images, etc. You can actually literally delete the meta files and it will just remake them again. So you mostly don't need to worry about those meta files. But if you're having trouble opening by double clicking, you can always hit Reveal in Finder or Reveal in File Explorer, find the script manually, and then right click on it and open with whatever you want. But once you hook it up in your preferences, once again, Unity, preferences, external tools, external script editor, change that to whatever you want, you'll be able to double click and it will automatically open. Okay, so I would like us all to open your player controller script, which actually, I think I broke Visual Studio. 1 second. Technical difficulties abound. Great, there we go. All right, so once you open your script, you'll be presented with this. You'll be presented with a bunch of different stuff. Now, I find that coding, 100%, is the thing that people are most scared of when developing games. I started at making games quite young, and it took me literally years to be comfortable enough to teach people how to code. It took me probably a decade, maybe over a decade. So the reason that I say that is not to scare you, but instead to say it is okay for you to not know what is going on. You will not know what's going on for a while, and I just want you to move ahead as best you can and not get discouraged. Coding is not that bad, it is fun, and it allows you to make amazing, cool games. So let's start with just a tiny introduction to coding. Obviously, we can't do too much because we're trying to get our game functional today, but I want to at least address sort of the very principles of our scripts here in C#. So C# is the coding language that we are using in Unity. It is now the only language that Unity supports. Unity once supported JavaScript, and I think you may still be able to. I don't know. Everybody uses C# these days, though. C# is a pretty wonderful language. It's one of my favorites at this point in time. And you'll notice inside of a new script, you still have a fair amount that's already been written for you. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but especially since we have a recording, this is something that you can look back at later. And like I said, all of the scripts that I wrote for you, like that mover and that jumper, are going to have lots of comments in them. This is a comment. A comment does not affect the code, and it's only there for humans to read it. All of the scripts that I've written for you have lots of comments to try to explain what's actually going on. So the best thing that you can do for yourself after this class is to just jump into the code and kind of investigate it and do your best to understand what's happening and just play with it, change stuff and see what happens. Does it break? Does it not break? Who knows? So here's our very basic introduction to coding. At the top of this file, we have 3 using statements. You can imagine that using is basically like importing. So we are importing a couple of different collections. These are essentially just the code that Unity has already written for us, the stuff that already does things for us. And mostly you can ignore these. As we get a little bit more advanced, you will add your own using statements, but for this course, we're not going to be doing that. The next line down is probably the most important. This is the declaration of the class. Whenever you see the term class, that actually means a script or a piece of code. those are mostly interchangeable terms. So if somebody says, yeah, I wrote 3 classes, they're saying they wrote 3 separate pieces of code. Next to that, you will see the term public. This is the accessibility, and basically it just means that everybody can see this. And besides that, you guys don't need to worry about that for this class. The third thing you'll see is the actual name of the script. Now, this is something that we wrote ourselves. This could be anything, and that would be totally fine. The only thing that we want to pay attention to is keeping this as organized as we can. So if it is the thing that controls the player, maybe we should call it the player controller, right? We just want to make it clear. And the last thing is the inheritance, which is a much more advanced term, and you basically don't need to worry about it, but this just tells this script how to behave, mostly. Now, the thing that people have the hardest time sort of getting acquainted with are these curly braces. Curly braces designate a beginning and an end of a thing. In this case, we have an open curly brace and a closing curly brace. We know that they are connected because they're on the same indented line, and because we always have an open and then a close associated with each other. So we can see we have an open, and then an open, and then a close. So now this one is closed, and then an open, and then a close, and then a close down here where we've closed this top one. So we always have an open and a close. If we're missing one, Unity will crash, and we'll be like, where's my close? This is how we let objects know where they start and end. So currently, this opening and closing bracket is referring to the line directly above it, the player controller. So everything inside of this open and curly bracket is a part of the player controller. And that's how we know. So is thing a part of start? Is thing a part of start? Come on, be brave. It's not too hard. Is thing a part of start?
Yes.
Yes. Is thing a part of update?
No.
No. Yeah, because it's not down here, right? Is thing a part of player controller?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, because it's inside of the opening and the closing, right? So it's that simple. It's just the curly braces just designate the beginning and end. It's kind of like the start of a sentence and the period. They are, this is not, a lot of the things that I'm going to say, just because coding and game development is such a big field, a lot of the things that I might say may not always pertain. They may sometimes have exceptions. But the vast majority of the time, an opening and a curly brace always refer to the line above it. So this line, the start, is what we call a function. A function is a chunk of code that does some specific task. So I'm going to write, you guys don't need to type this. This is just an example. I'm going to write a quick function for us here.
Willem,
Yes.
I'm just going to interrupt for a minute. There's a few people who do not have other text editors available, and they need to open it in Notepad. Could you just give them a quick run through of opening in Notepad?
Yes, I can. So if you don't have a text editor available to you, Visual Studio is not that big. You can go download it right now, and it's free. You can also download, if you want something even lighter, Sublime Text. Like I said, this is one of my favorites. You can download this right now for free. It will be very quick to download. If you have, if all else fails, you can absolutely open them in Notepad, but it will be way more confusing. It will work for today, and then maybe you can come back to your code later with an actual text editor, script editor.
Could you show
in order to open something?
Sorry, I just wanted to say, could you show quickly how to go to preferences again and select the Notepad? I know you're on Mac. Just show how.
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks.
So if I have Unity open in the top left, I can go to Unity Preferences. Unity Preferences. And then there's an external tools about in the middle area. And we can see that there's an external script editor that I can set to whatever I want. And I can hit browse to go find it. So you can set that to Sublime Text or Visual Studio or MonoDevelop or whatever else you want to use. Okay, so if you do have to open this just in like a text editor, you will have to do a few things. You will have to right-click on whatever script you want to open and hit Reveal in Finder so that you're here in the folder itself on your computer. And then you can right-click on that script and hit Open With, and you can see that there's actually tons of options, and that's because code is literally just text. If you have no other option, probably text edit or just like called text or something on PC, right? Whatever it is on PC.
It's called Notepad.
Notepad, yeah. You can totally open it on Notepad or text edit. And we can see here if I right click on my jumper and I hit open in text edit, I will have it available to me. If nothing else, make this window really big because that will at least make it look a little bit more like my code. But you can see that it doesn't have any of the colors to indicate what's happening. It also will not have auto indentations. You may like make things look a little bit more ugly. And it won't have any auto correction. So if it notices problems, it will not do that. And we can see here, I'm even having trouble putting it on the correct like depth, which won't break your game. It's just harder to read. If you are editing in Notepad, the big thing that I recommend you do is just, as much as possible, keep your code looking correct to mine. Keep it looking organized. So here we can see that my opening and closing are on the same line, but this function is not. So I'm going to hit Tab and make sure it's on the same line. And then I'll select all of this and hit Tab, which totally doesn't work. I'll have to do it one at a time, to put those on their own line. Once again, it won't break your game if they're not at the correct tab, but it will just look ugly and you'll get confused pretty quickly. So you can definitely use this for today. We only have another 50 minutes, right? If nothing else, all of the scripts, including the player controller, are available to you here in the scripts folder. Excuse me, in the scripts folder that you downloaded, this one. And so if nothing else, if you totally cannot find it, cannot find a script editor, can't get it to work, you can always just use these scripts and follow along for next time. This has a completed player controller, which is the equivalent of our player controller, though it does do some extra stuff. So for right now, it won't quite work, but we will make it work a little bit later today. Okay, hopefully most of you guys are caught up and editing some scripts. So I'm going to go back to mine now. So I was writing an example function. Typically, this is, once again, not always true because there are many other ways that this can happen. But typically, our opening and our closing curly brace indicates something. In this case, it indicates a function. We know that something is a function generally because it has a name, and then it has an opening and a closing parenthesis. That opening and a closing parenthesis can be empty, or it can take in parameters, which are values that will change how our function works. So if I wrote this sum function that all it does is return example1 plus example2, this function is literally just going to add stuff for us. So if I were going to use this function, I would say sum of 5 and 5 to indicate the two parameters, and it would output the result of these two additions. So this function would give us a 10 for our example int. If I change this value to 2, what would example int become? This one's not too hard. 7, yeah. So don't worry if you're still feeling confused. Like I said, this is going to be a quick one so that we can get Mario working. And later, you can totally continue to do some coding on your own time. For now, our our player controller is not going to need the start function. Let me pull that up real quickly. I got a second screen. Give me just 1 second. I don't want to write things that are totally wrong, so I usually follow the prompts in class. Okay, so our player controller is not going to need the start function. And once again, like I said, the player controller is available to you in a completed state. You can see the completed player controller here. So you can actually open this up and follow along here if you so desire. But I would like you to, if you are comfortable, if you have a text editor, I would like you to write as much of it as you can, because that way you're going to understand how coding works a little bit better. So we do not need our start function, and we don't need this sum thing that I wrote for us. So we can go ahead and delete all of that. We do want to keep our update function. Now, start and update are two special functions that Unity has built in for us. The start function happens whenever this object exists for the first time. So that basically means when the game starts. Start is going to happen just once. Anything inside of start will get executed. So if we had our sum in there, that's when the sum would actually happen. Our update happens, just like it says here, every frame, which in most games is somewhere between 30 and 60 times a second. So update happens a lot. This is where we're going to put input. This is where we're going to actually listen to hear if the player hits any keys. So here's what we're going to do. On a new line, above update, but below the opening curly brace for the class, I want you to write public mover my mover. Now you'll notice a couple things. You'll also want to type public jumper my jumper. So go ahead and type those out while I talk. You'll notice a couple of things. First things first, you'll notice that these are public. Whenever we declare something like this is what we call a variable. In this case, our variables happen to be a mover and a jumper, but variables can be basically anything. It's just something that we are recording or keeping track of. So it could be an integer, which would be a number. It could be a string, which is a bit of text. It could be pretty much anything. It could even be a player controller. That can count as a variable, though I wouldn't be allowed to create a player controller inside of a player controller because that would confuse things. But in this case, we're going to make ourselves a mover and a jumper because those components will tell Mario how to move and how to jump. So whenever we make a variable, we're going to first have the declaration of accessibility. In this case, it is public, so everybody can see it. We then have a declaration of what type of variable it is. In this case, it is a mover and a jumper. And then we have whatever we want to name it. We can name this anything. But once again, we want our variables to be as easily readable as possible. So I called this my mover and my jumper. You will also notice that when I am declaring a type, I have an uppercase. And when I'm declaring a function, I also have an uppercase first letter. But when I'm declaring a variable, I have a lowercase first letter. This is syntactical, syntax, meaning that this will not break the game if I did that. But this helps it be more human readable. So whenever I see something that's lowercase, I know it's a variable. Whenever I see something that's uppercase, I know it's something a little bit more serious. Okay. So you guys should have a public mover, my mover, and a public jumper, my jumper. We are now going to add what's called a conditional. And you're going to have to type a couple of things here. I'm going to type if, this is inside of my update. I'm going to type if, parentheses, input with an uppercase I, dot, get key, parentheses, key code, dot, left arrow. And then under my if statement, I'm going to put an opening and a closing curly brace of its own. If input.getKey, keycode.left arrow. If input.getKey, keycode.left arrow. Okay. So this may look like it's super complicated, but it's actually all of the components that we already talked about. It's all of the pieces that we already talked about. We know that input is some type of variable. In this case, it's what we call a static variable, which means we can access it just from the name of the class itself. So we just need to type input. We then have a dot, which allows us to access the inside of this variable for anything that's in there. And in this case, it has a function called getKey. We know this is a function because it has parentheses. Then, just like our sum function, we're going to have to put some information in there to help the getKey function work. In this case, getKey expects to know which key, which button on your keyboard, it's listening for. And in this case, it is listening for the left arrow, which we indicate by saying keycode.left arrow. So the result of all of this is whatever is inside of our closing and opening curly braces right here will happen if and only if we hit the left arrow key. All right. So let's punch in some stuff. Now our mover has a function in it, which we can access by saying myMover dot accelerate in direction. And then we can put our parentheses. Did I misspell this? Ah, great. It's just because I have not put in the parameter yet. I can then, inside of these parentheses, say new. This will all look very scary, but don't worry, I will explain. And also, you can always copy and paste. New vector2. And then inside those parentheses, we're going to put a -1f, a comma, and a 0. And then at the end of that whole line, I'm going to put a semicolon. So copy that exactly. Now, besides white spaces, which would mean new lines, spaces, tabs, white spaces are ignored by the compiler and will not break your game. So if you are missing a space and I have a space, that's fine. But literally anything else can break your game. If you have an uppercase N here, when it should be lowercase, it will break. If you have a, I don't know, a misspelling, so this says vector3 instead of vector2, it will break. If you miss your semicolon, it will break. This is the scary and frustrating part of code, but it's because computers are not intelligent and they can't tell what you were trying to do. They can only tell exactly what you tell them to do. So you're going to make a new line here that says myMover dot accelerate in direction, parentheses, new vector2, parentheses, -1, comma, 0, parentheses, parentheses. You can see, by the way, one of the reasons Visual Studio is nice is because I can select it and see the corresponding object. So if I were to click on, oh, it's not actually doing it for my curly braces. There we go. If I were to double click on one of my curly braces, I can see its partner, and that will sort of help me debug. If I click on the parentheses, I can see its partner. That will also help me debug. You need to always have an opening and a closing for both parentheses and curly braces. All right, so we have myMover.accelerate in direction. This is a function in your mover that you should look at after class, and basically it just makes the object move in that direction. So for now, until we confirm that this is working, we're going to leave this as it is. Mario will only be able to move left for now. If you are having issues, or you just want to see this work because you're having too many problems or whatever else, you can always grab the completed player controller and just use that. Okay, so I'm going to now come back to Unity. First things first, if there are any problems in my code, I will immediately see in my console. It will say, let me actually demonstrate. So if I forgot my semicolon and I come back to Unity, it will immediately say, hey, something's wrong. Red error means the game will crash if I try to run it. And this looks like a jarbled mess, but it's actually very clearly telling you what's wrong. First of all, this 14 is telling you the line number, and this path right here is telling you the script. So it's saying, hey, in player controller, line 14, there's some kind of problem. And this looks a little confusing just because it's very small, but this is literally saying you're missing a semicolon. Semicolon expected. So if I go to the player controller script and I go to line 14, we can see that I'm missing a semicolon. So for many of your errors, if you just read it very slowly, and also you can Google pretty much every error you will run into in Unity, you'll be able to figure out what's happening. Is anybody having any major code issues right now? Okay, so in order to get Mario actually moving, right now, our input controller is not actually attached to him. Our input controller, or our player controller, excuse me, I'm getting tongue-tied from my example earlier. Our player controller is not actually attached to Mario. Just like our sprite renderer, our rigid body, our capsule collider, this script is actually its own component. We just made our own component. So on Mario, I want you to, in the inspector, scroll down, hit Add Component, and go ahead and search for Player Controller. And hit that. Now, if you do not see the player controller, that means that there is some kind of issue with your script. And let me know if you're having that, and we'll try to fix it. So now we have a player controller script. And we can see that the two variables that I made public, if they were not public, they would not be visible here. The two variables that I made public are both here in the inspector, now waiting for me to actually use them. So in order to make Mario move to the left, I have to now hit Add Component and also add the mover component that I wrote for you. So go ahead and add the mover component as well. You are almost done. If I were to hit play here and let Mario drop and land on his blocks, and then I hit left, nothing will happen, and I will get a crash warning that says null reference exception. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. Now that warning, that crash, may sound a little bit scary. What the hell is a null reference exception? But this is actually one of the greatest errors of all time, because it is super easy to fix 99% of the time. If something says null reference exception, object reference not set to an instance of an object, can anybody guess what I forgot to do?
Is the script not attached?
Yes! Fantastic work. Yes, that's it. So we'll see that my player controller, just like my sprite renderer, right, is expecting a mover. And it currently says that there's no mover. So if that script is trying to tell the mover to move to the left, like we just coded, it doesn't have a mover to actually talk to. What mover are we going to drop into that box? This one. So this is another common gotcha. I want everybody to listen one more time for me to a common gotcha. You will probably make this mistake at some point. Whenever you want to drop a script into an empty box in your inspector, you must grab a script that exists in the scene. So I need to grab this mover, the one that is attached to Mario, and drop it there. Sometimes this is the problem. This is a mistake. Some people will think they have to drag the mover from the project folder and drop it there. And we can see that Unity won't actually let you do that most of the time, which is great. But in some cases, you will be able to do that. That is not what you want. You want the script that actually exists in the scene, because that's the script that exists, that actually can do work. So once you can literally just drag and drop this component, like click on the bar there that says mover, drag and drop that guy into that empty my mover spot. Once you do that, you can now hit play. Mario will drop into your world, and if you hit left, he will fly off into the sunset. And there is a reason he is spinning, which we'll talk about in a second. But I want to pause here, and I want everybody to get to the point where you can actually move Mario to the left. I'd like you to let me know if it is not working for some reason. Wow. Whee! Amazing.
Mario.
Okay, whose face can I currently see? Patrick, do you got a Mario that moves left? Great. If you don't have a Mario that moves left, speak now or forever hold your peace. There are a number of things that may have gone wrong, but I can only help you if you let me know. So let me know.
Even if you just write in the text channel, if you have it running, at least get some sort of feedback, that would help.
Yes, that would be great. Okay. I'm seeing Kai. All right, so I'm going to keep moving to make sure we get as much in as we can in this 2-hour chunk, unless people stop me with questions. So now that we have Mario moving to the left, there's a couple things that we'll notice almost immediately. First things first, why the heck does he roll? He rolls. Is there a question?
Someone is having, I can't find my scripts in add component.
Yes. So that almost definitely means that there is a problem with your script. If you have something in your console, so you see how my console is completely empty? If you have anything in your console, that is a problem with your script. It will tell you what the problem is, and you'll have to fix it before you can add that component. The other thing that may happen is that first gotcha that I pointed out. If your script is named something different in the project than it is inside of the script itself, these two things need to be exactly the same. If they are not exactly the same, you will not be able to find your script. So check those two things.
I'm sorry, I was looking at the chat. I'm not sure if that question was asked. Kai can't find her scripts in add component.
Yes.
Yeah, that was asked? Okay.
Yeah, so
I was looking at the chat,
yeah,
sorry.
that's what I was just talking about.
All right, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. It's okay. Thank you for helping. So sure. Yeah, just to say it one more time, Kai, that means that there is a problem with your script. There are two things that will happen very frequently. One is that your script is named something different in the project than it is inside of the script itself. So remember, those two need to be exactly the same. So here it says player controller, and here it says player controller. Even if literally even if it's just like that with a lowercase c, even that difference will make Unity not notice the script. So make sure they are exactly the same. And then the other thing is that you may just have a problem like that semicolon that I was showing you earlier. But if you have a problem, it will point it out in the console. So you'll have to fix that. Do not hesitate to ask me about these problems, because it is much faster if we can jump in and fix it together. And then everybody gets to see it actually being fixed. It's much easier that way. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving unless there's more questions. Mario, the current problem with him is that he rolls. If you are happy with a rolling Mario, then go ahead and leave him. That's great. You have a new custom version of Mario. The reason that he rolls is because he has a round bottom. We're using a Capsule Collider, right? So instead of sort of slipping, he'll actually fall. In order to make him stand upright, the rigid body actually has some controls for us that are very useful right here. So with Mario selected, I want you to go to your rigid body component here, rigid body 2D component, and you'll see that there's a constraints. It says constraints there, and it's actually a drop down. Whenever you see this little arrow, little gray arrow, that means that this is a drop down, and you can click the gray arrow or just the name itself to see all of the options underneath it. And in order to make him not rotate, all you have to do is hit freeze rotation. You'll see freeze rotation Z. Just click that on so it's checked on. And now Mario will sort of drag himself along the ground instead of rotating. Okay. So just to say that one more time, if you want Mario to not roll, click on Mario, go to your rigid body 2D component, go to the constraints, drop that down, and hit freeze rotation Z. Check that on. All right, so now is where we make a little bit more progress. What I'd like you to do is go back to your player controller script, copy this entire block here, the if statement, and still inside of your update, we can see that I have my open and my close brackets for my update. Just make a couple new lines and paste this again. We're going to use the same code to make our right arrow work. All we're going to do to change from a left arrow to a right arrow is literally change this text, first of all. So instead of left arrow, we want to type right arrow. And then, I didn't talk about this much for the sake of brevity, but when we accelerate in direction using our mover, the mover takes in what's called a vector 2. A vector 2 is essentially an arrow in space. And with this one, we are pointing towards the left. But with this one, we need to point towards the right. So what do you think we do to change it from pointing towards the left to pointing towards the right?
The negative.
Yep, just remove that negative. So it's now positive, which means it's going to point towards the right. This first letter here for vectors is your x, and the second number is your y. So currently we're not pointing up or down at all. We're just pointing towards the left. Imagine, xy axis, a graph. And now this one is pointing towards the right. So now if we come back into Unity, let Unity compile. And by the way, another like smaller common gotcha is that people will just forget to save their script. Always make sure to Command S or Control S when you make changes to your script. Otherwise, Unity will not notice that you changed it. And then hit play. And Mario will drop, and now he can slip and slide around.
It is possible that your spreads gone. I added your spreads of multiple things, but they gone. It is possible.
They're gone?
Yeah, they are not. But there is a wall and Mario, and nothing else. There are no multiple platforms that I made for editing.
Are you? So you are currently seeing, like Mario has no components attached to him? Or do you mean when you hit add component, you can't find them?
I don't need a component. I mean spread. Just like the image of multiple bricks. They are gone. I made them multiple.
Yeah, so this is I might know what's happening, and this is an easy one, so let's try this first. Remember I was talking about Unity will sometimes just do weird stuff. Try double-clicking on Mario in your hierarchy to zoom to him. And if that doesn't work, try double-clicking on one of your platforms. Did that make everything appear again?
No.
Okay. So that is a pretty common one. Let's, are you comfortable sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Once.
So go ahead and hit share your screen. You can see on mine in the bottom left, it's a screen button. Hit share screen and then hit entire screen. Great. Oh, that works. Okay. So I'm seeing a platform. So what are you missing?
I added a duplicate platform of around 7 or 5, but they are gone. It is possible, or it is something that I did.
Are they just on top of each other? Try dragging one of them to the left or to the right.
No.
Okay. So
they are gone.
What scene are you currently in? In the top left of your hierarchy, it'll tell you what scene you're in.
Top left.
Are you still in the sample scene? In the very top left? Next to the little scene symbol, the little white thing? Are you in the sample scene? Does it say that there?
No. Shaded.
So what does it say?
Shaded.
Untitled? Is that what that says?
Yes.
Okay, so click on your... oh no, there is a Mario in your scene and everything, right?
Yeah.
You can see him in the hierarchy. So what happens when you double click on Mario? Can you zoom out when you have your mouse over the scene? Try scrolling outwards. Just zoom out. So click into the scene. You don't need to select Mario, but when your mouse is over the scene, scroll outwards on the trackpad or use your mouse wheel if you have it. Here, is there anybody know of an actual zoom button? I'll just use that. Let's see. Nope. So when you're scrolling through a website, how do you go up and down? Use a trackpad?
Yeah, I use trackpad. But
So that
it
should be all
doesn't
you have to do. Yeah, whatever you do to scroll up and down on a website, if you click into the scene and then scroll downwards, it should zoom out.
Okay, we will make it because our time is running.
What happens if you hit?
But
Let's try
my
one more thing.
code is working. Okay.
Yeah, we can try to fix it after maybe, but let's try one more thing. If you hit play, what happens? Okay. Okay. So your stuff does exist. I think. What tab are you currently in? When you stop playing? In the middle. Are you in a scene? Can you click the scene tab for me? And then double click on Mario? Yeah, you are in the scene. Okay. Oh. But now it's there. Is that fixed?
Yeah.
Okay, well, for now, we're gonna keep moving just to make sure we can try to get in a little bit more, and maybe we can try to fix that at the end there. Thank you for sharing. Sometimes weird stuff happens, y'all. All right, so I should still be streaming. Can everybody see my stuff? If not, let me know.
No, yeah,
Okay,
we can see it.
So we should now have a Mario. Great, thank you. So we should now have a Mario that can move left and right. We're now going to add jumping using the My Jumper here. So I'm going to make a new if statement in my player controller on a new line still inside of the update. I'm going to type if, and I can copy this part if I want. So if input.getKey, keycode dot. But this time I'm going to put up arrow, or you could put space bar or whatever else, whatever you want the key to actually be. And then I'm going to put the opening and closing curly braces just like before. But this time I'm going to type my jumper, and the jump function on the jumper is way simpler than the mover. So all I'm going to actually do is type jump. That is literally the name of the function, and it does not take any parameters. So all I have to type is myjumper.jump, and then empty parentheses and a closing semicolon. If input.getKey, keycode.up arrow, etc., etc. Okay, so with that, we actually should have a Mario who can now be controlled, who can now move around. And, oh, I'm having a null reference exception. Somebody remind me what that means?
It's not added to the function.
Yep, it's not added to the inspector. It's not actually connected. So my player controller is looking for a jumper, my jumper, and it is currently none. So I have to remember to add component, find that jumper. And the jumper requires a ground detector. So I both need to add a jumper, and then I also need to add component ground detector. So add component jumper, add component ground detector. And then once I have both of those attached to my Mario, I can drag and drop my jumper just by clicking the bar again, right? And drop it into that empty box like we had for the mover as well. And now if I hit play, we have a Mario who can move left and right, and he can jump. Wow! Okay. So all I did for that, once again, I edited my script to have another if statement. You can even copy and paste this if you want. The if statement this time has the key code that I want for jumping. So up arrow, or I could make this space if I wanted. Or anything else, I could make it W, right? And then all I had to do was talk to my jumper here, which we made earlier, and just say myjumper.jump, parentheses, semicolon. All right. So we now have a Mario who can jump and move around. We're going to add one more script that I already wrote for you to this game to make it so that we can actually explore this world. Because currently, if I drop into the world, I do not actually follow Mario, right? He'll fall off the world and I'll never see him again. So I have one more script that it's available to you that I already wrote. If you go back to that folder, we'll see that we have a follower script. You can click and drag this follower script into your project, just like the other scripts. The follower script. And then this follower script actually goes on the main camera because we want the main camera to follow Mario. So on my main camera, I'm going to hit Add Component, and I'm going to add the follower component. And we will notice that the follower requires a followed transform. That followed transform is Mario. So I can drag his entire game object from the hierarchy. I can click and drag Mario and drop him into that empty box. You'll know you did it right if it says Mario. And now, when I play the game, it is following Mario and actually moving with him. If you're curious how that works, you can always open up the script a little bit later and check out what it's doing. None of the scripts are too complicated. Some of it might be confusing for you at this time, but hopefully you can follow along and try to make it work. Okay. So just to say that one more time, I grabbed the follower script from the scripts that I had available to you. I dragged and dropped that into my scripts folder. On my main camera, I hit Add Component. I added a follower. And then I dropped in Mario. I literally dragged and dropped Mario's game object here from the hierarchy into this Mario transform position, the followed transform position. Okay. Now, we're going to, because it's pretty much the end of class, I'm going to get us a couple of new features, and we're going to talk about sort of how you can continue working on this in the future. Because we recorded the class, you can always take a look at this later. I also have one other recorded class that I can put in the channel of Mario where we got a little bit further. Don't feel too bad about not getting as far. It's always sort of a crapshoot in how far we get. Depends on sort of tech issues and stuff like that. So there is a recorded class where we get a little bit further, which you guys can watch and follow along. But I will get you guys up to speed, hopefully. So what I'd like you to do is from the scripts, I want you to grab, let's do the completed coin, the completed flag, and also, I guess let's just grab all of it. So completed coin, completed flag, and then also grab the destructible and the destructor. So that's 4 different scripts. Completed coin, completed flag, destructible, destructor. You can click and drag all 4 of those scripts and drop them into the scripts folder. Grab the completed coin, completed flag, destructible, destructor. Now these scripts are pretty simple. I want you to actually add the flag and the coin to your scene. So click and drag the coin into your world. That's a little bit big maybe, so we can make that smaller. Let's see, 0.1. That looks good. Put that somewhere that makes sense to you. And you can do multiple coins if you want. But before you do multiple coins, when you have the coin actually made in your world, I want you to hit Add Component. And I want you to search for completed coin and attach that. And you'll see that the completed coin actually doesn't need anything. It doesn't need you to drop anything, but it does need a collider. So hit Add Component and search for a collider. And in this case, a Capsule Collider will be perfect. So hit Capsule Collider 2D. And we'll see that it's a little bit big. So if you want, you can mess with the scale. I'm just going to leave that because it's not a big deal. And one other thing for the coin and for the goal that we're about to make, you must, on the collider, on the coin, hit is trigger. This is a little bit weird. But if I were to look at this coin, we'll see that this coin uses the function on trigger enter 2D. This is another automatic function, just like our start and our update, that happens for us. This happens whenever something touches it. So if something touches this coin, this function, these things are going to happen. However, when it is a trigger, we see it says on trigger enter. We must click this is trigger toggle here in the Capsule Collider on the coin. Basically, things can either be colliders or they can be triggers. If they are a collider, we will actually run into each other, like Mario and the platforms. If it is a trigger, we will go straight through each other. We will not actually collide. But we will still know that we touched each other, which we can use in our script to do stuff. So this is the kind of thing, if we were like playing Ocarina of Time and we walked through that doorway to where we fight Goma, the very first boss, walking through that doorway, there's probably an invisible trigger there to let the game know that we actually entered the doorway. That's what a trigger is for. It's a little weird that you have to add a collider and then hit the is trigger button. But that's just how it is. So make sure you remember to do that. I'm going to also add my goal. By the way, we noticed that in our console, one of the simplest things you guys can code is this debug.log, parentheses, quotation marks, and then anything you want in here. And that will print to the console down here whenever that line of code happens. So this now lets us know when we picked up a coin. I am also going to add my flag to the world, which is a little bit big here. I can scale that down as well. That looks about right. And just like the coin, my flag needs a collider. So I'll add a box collider 2D. And by the way, guys, I'm intentionally moving a little bit fast here because we have the recorded class. You can take a look at this after if there's anything that you missed. I'm hoping to basically give you enough so that you can keep working on your Mario game. I can make the size of my collider a little bit smaller so that it fits that flag better. We can see the green lines as usual. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit Add Component and search for the goal. Or what do we call it? Oh, we just called it flag. The flag. Completed flag. Now the completed flag expects a win screen. We can see here it says win screen, and it currently says none. But it actually will still behave correctly even without that. And that's because I put in what's called a null check, which you can go and check out in the script itself. Basically, this says if win screen does not equal null, so if we have a win screen, if a win screen is attached, then we will do stuff to it. If we do not have a win screen, it won't do anything. So you guys don't need to bother with a win screen right now, but you can totally add one later, and I will mention how to do that in just a moment. So now if I touch the flag, oh, so we know that we forgot to set it to a trigger if we're actually running into that flag. The flag, we can tell by looking at the script, also expects to be a trigger. It would literally say on collision enter if it was expecting to be a collision. In this case, it is expecting to be a trigger because we want to be able to step through the flag and not run into it. So on the flag, we're going to hit is trigger. And now we will be able to, quote unquote, win our game of Mario. Whoop. And we can see that it says game 1 in our console. Okay. Now, in the last minute or two here, I'm going to give you some information on how to add more to your game that you can write down. You can look at the recording later, whatever else, so that you can hopefully continue to follow this tutorial and get a little bit further. Now, as I said, I also prepared for you online in that Google Drive folder this Mario in 2 hours handout, which gives you some information on what we are actually doing. So you can try to use this to follow what we're doing and for some extra challenges in the future. But you can also listen to what I'm saying now. So to add a Piranha Plant, an enemy, to our game, you are going to need to add the image to the scene. Once the image is in the scene, you're going to need to add a collider. And this one does want to be a collider. It uses collisions. Then on the Piranha Plant, we're going to need to add a destructor, a destructor, a thing that destructs. This thing has only one variable, which is how much damage it deals. So this is how you can make enemies more and less dangerous. On Mario, you need to add component destructible. And you'll see that this thing has hit points. Currently, Mario has 3 hit points, but in a traditional game of Mario, we actually only have 1. So I'm going to set that to 1. So what I just did, I added my Piranha Plant to the world. I gave it a box collider. I added a destructor to the plant because it is the thing that will destroy. It will destroy Mario if we touch it. And then I added a destructible to Mario because it is the thing being destroyed. And once again, look at all of these scripts yourselves. These are all scripts that I wrote, and they're all fairly self-explanatory when you get into them. Of course, it's not going to be easy right off the bat if this is your first time coding, but if you keep playing with it, it will be fairly clear. Now, if I go up to this Piranha Plant and I touch it, Mario will die. So now I have something that can be destroyed in my world. And the final thing that I'll show you very quickly is UI. In order to add that game screen, if you remember, this flag here is expecting a win screen, is expecting a pop-up to happen when you actually touch it. In order to add that, I'm going to go up to plus, I'm going to go to UI, and I'm going to go to panel. And we will see that this panel is massive. That is just how Unity does UI. If you want to change it, I'm saying things very nice and slowly so that hopefully you can come do this with a recording. If you want to change why it's so big, you can see, first of all, that I can manipulate these UI objects just like anything else. And we can see the panel actually is displayed on the game correctly. If I want to make it smaller and not absolutely massive in the scene, I can click on my canvas, click on the canvas, go down to the canvas component, and change from render mode screen space overlay to screen space camera. And then it needs a render camera. And we can drag and drop the main camera into that render camera slot. And suddenly the canvas is actually the real size. That's, once again, just a setting that Unity decided by default it should be really big like that so that it's easier for people to edit. But you can always change it like this. The one other thing you'll have to change is currently you'll notice that the canvas is actually behind Mario in the platform. If you want it to be closer to the camera and therefore in front of Mario, change the plane distance from 100 to just 1. And now it will be in front of Mario. And as always, really useful tools to be able to double-click to move to whatever you're trying to look at. Now my panel, I'm going to make it a little bit darker here. And I can add some text to it. I can right-click on the panel, go down to UI, and hit text. And it will add a new text object. You can see that the panel is indented from the canvas, and the text is indented from the panel. That means that these are children of each other. So when I move the panel, the text will move with it. I can change this text to say, "You suck. You are dead." And this box, the text box, needs to be big enough there for it to actually display. And now this is probably, if you pay attention to nothing else, I know I've thrown a lot at you in the last 15 minutes here. If you pay attention to nothing else, this is one of the more useful features in Unity. I can set this panel to inactive so that it is not in the way. I do that by clicking on the panel, and then in the inspector, we'll see in the top left, the very top left, right next to its name, there's a little checkbox. If I click that, the panel will turn off, and the player will not be able to interact with it. I can do that with anything. So I could click on Mario and turn him off if he was in the way and I was trying to edit something or something like that. And now the final step to get everything hooked up in this game is on the flag, there is a windscreen box. I can drag and drop that panel. Oh, I forgot that this was a win screen and not a death screen. I might want to change that text, but that's fine. On the flag, I can drag and drop the panel into the empty box here. And now when I hit play, the code that I wrote for you will automatically pull up that panel when Mario touches. I might not be able to get over that. Let me make this a little bit smaller. Hold on. This is what we call playtesting. In my playtest, I discovered that this plant is too big, so I had to make it smaller. The key to making an amazing video game is to playtest a lot with many different people. All right, so I'm going to jump over that flower. I'm going to get up to this thing. And now the panel will tell me that I died. Okay. So, moving on for all of you guys in the future, after this class, because we're going to wrap up now. What you can do is open up the scripts that I have available to you. You can, for instance, instead of using the player controller that I had you write, you can use this one, which requires you to attach a sprite renderer, because it will actually turn Mario left and right so that he's not always facing right. And it will also ask you to attach, this one is optional, it will also ask you to attach an audio source. There is some information in the handout about attaching audio sources, but that allows you to actually play sounds in your game of Mario. So what I would recommend you do is open up those scripts and, to the best of your ability, read them. There are tons of comments in here. Listen for key presses and move left. Play a jump sound. This one actually has a little bit less documentation, but let's see, maybe the mover. Start is called before the first frame. Normalize your speed, set it between 0 and 1. Make our velocity faster depending on acceleration and frame rate. So open up these scripts and kind of investigate them and see if you can understand how they're actually working. One place to start might be the jumper, because that one is a little bit sort of more straightforward. You can also definitely follow the handout that I gave you. Where the heck is it? Here we go. And this has some extra challenges. So in this one, you can make a new level. You can add some sound effects. This one's going to be harder. You could try to add a score to your game. The other thing that I recommend you do is do some tutorials and do some game jams. Game jams are huge. Game jams are very, very one of the most effective ways to become a more effective game developer. Now, before I close down and say goodbye, does anybody have last questions about the game or about game development in general?
Wait. No, that's a tip. Sorry, I thought that was a question.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information on what IGA is doing and what we have coming up. So basically, I've told you guys already that the Indie Game Academy, the group that I'm a headmaster of, basically helps people run their own indie studios and learn how to develop games. We have a class starting next week on Monday that will meet 2 times a week for 1 month. Each of those classes is 2 hours long, like the one we did today, where it will much more slowly and much more in-depth teach you the same skills that we talked about today. In that class, you will finish a game of Peggle, the classic game, if you guys know that, as well as your own platformer like Mario here, but much more in-depth and much more slow. And that class has a bunch of information here that you can check out. It, like I said, starts on Monday. So if you're interested in joining a month-long class where you finish 2 games and publish those games in 1 month, please do. I will put information here in the Discord. Here's the website. And the main thing that you can do if you want to come, if you are interested in actually joining the program, is to book a one-on-one call with me where I can tell you more information so you can ask questions. There's no obligation when we actually get on the phone. And during that call, we can talk about it and decide if it's right for you. But otherwise, thanks for learning Mario with me, guys. It's been good.
Thanks a lot, Willem. I really enjoyed this, and Thanks, David, also for initiating this contact. I love the idea. I love how it went. I didn't expect this turnout, to be honest. I myself haven't touched a Unity editor in 2 years, and this makes me want to go back to it again. I'm not sure if that's good or not because I need to focus, but it made me really want to get back to it. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And I hope you benefited from it. I love seeing artists and other non-programmers trying to get their hands dirty. If you followed along even halfway through, I really take my hat off, especially if you're not a programmer. I know this can be scary, intimidating at first, but the more you look at it, the more you practice it, it's going to feel more like a second language. And as he mentioned, he's giving a more slow-paced, in-depth course. Please, if you're interested, take advantage of this. You can reach out to him. The URL is in the voice text channel.
Yes.
And
absolutely, guys.
I need to give a shout out again to Megas Mendu. He's really been helpful throughout the entire course, giving a lot of tips throughout the channel. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone else.
Yes. All right. Thanks, guys. I would absolutely love to have you guys join in the class today. You will finish 2 games in 1 month, which is actually like insanely fast if you guys aren't aware. Our course, our program is all about getting people up to speed as quickly as possible. And we actually love teaching non-engineers because more artists, more product managers, more narrative designers, more audio designers need to get into the world of making games. So please check out that course. Please schedule a one-on-one call with me. I would love to chat with you about it. And otherwise, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go fall asleep.
All right. I thought it's not night there, but okay.
I'm just tired.
All right. Yeah, you deserve it. You deserve it. All right. Have a good night, good day, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining, and hopefully we'll have more of these events in the future.
Absolutely. I would love to.
All
Okay.
right.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Take care.